Hi, and welcome to the podcast. You're having tea with Alice. This week's episode is with radio announcer and electronic musician Tim Shiel. Welcome. Uh,
Hello.
can you tell us who you are and what you're drinking?
Well, I am Tim Shiel, as you mentioned. I'm a dad. I've got a few daughters. I live in Melbourne on Wurundjeri land. Today, I am in my music studio. So, if you're listening, you can't see this, but I'm surrounded by a bunch of musical instruments that I can't play very well. And I am drinking a coffee, which is sort of like tea, but coffee. And I
Bean
actually
tea.
just bean tea. That's right. Yeah. So I ran across the road. There's a really nice, like, trendy but kind of informal Japanese cafe that like always has smooth jazz vinyl playing and very friendly staff. And they've
And,
gotten used to me coming in and ordering a iced long black.
and this is in Melbourne, you say?
Yes, I think North Melbourne, technically yes, but yeah, a little Japanese cafe. Well, I say Japanese cafe because it's called Cafe Tommy, and they're always playing like Japanese jazz and kind of new city vibes, which is very calming in the morning.
My favourite place in Sydney is called the Tucker Tea House. It's in Double Bay, and I've been going there since I was skipping out of school at 16. And it's Helen and Taka, and she's Hong Kong Chinese, and he's a Taiwanese Japanese, and he's very chill and quiet, and she is has no boundaries, and will just like come and give you advice or tell you you're getting fat, and it's just delightful. But they always play sort of smooth jazz covers of like
Yeah,
Beatles tunes. Like you're listening to something and you're like, oh, this is a pleasant sort of uh, just like a little bit better than elevator music, background, calming vibe. And then you're like, wait a minute, is this? And then it's some song that you know really well.
yeah. It's
Is
all context, isn't it? Like if you were in an elevator and that music was playing, you'd probably be like, oh, I prefer silence to this. Like this is so annoying. But if you're in a cute tea house with what did you say? A Hong Kong lady telling you that you've gotten fat? Maybe like that's a vibe. Maybe the music sounds better in that context. I don't know.
or showing you pictures of her grandchildren or whatever. So
Oh,
you kind of
glorious. Yeah.
you're rolling the dice. You're either going in there and getting Taka, who's just like quietly dusting and rearranging teapots, and he's like a proper tea master trained, and he just
Oh,
got like just absolute Zen vibes, or you're in for like a download of all of the information and telling you to eat sardines and things. Just it's my favorite place in the world. I think it's
I love it.
so you don't drink tea, or you only drink tea sometimes?
I would say I'm like a coffee person. Like I'm very big on coffee, and then tea is kind of like if coffee's not available, or I like a fancy tea. Like I'm not downing tea every day, that kind of energy, but I do like treating myself to some kind of tea experience sometimes.
Well, then next time you're in Sydney, I'll take you to Taka Tea. I'm on
Yeah,
the Japanese green tea, but iced because I'm in Queensland at the moment.
gorgeous. Yeah, I
And
can see that. It looks like Romulan ale, and
yeah,
that's hopefully the first and last Star Trek reference.
no, never. I've got this other podcast called Realms Unknown where I talk about sci-fi and fantasy, and I've got just a little
Yes.
secret, entertaining thing for me and whoever's watching it on YouTube, which is nobody, where the drink that I have on the bookcase next to me is like a different wild color every time. So I've been like buying butterfly pea flower and like making blue teas, which I'll like pour a clear liquid into, and then it turns purple. And no one has commented on it so far.
Love it.
At some point it's going to be real fun just for me. And sometimes jokes just have to be for yourself. Uh,
Yes.
so what did you
I've been
been?
trying to explain this to my daughters.
How old are your daughters, and where is their level of comedy at? And do you have to pretend to
Oh,
laugh, or are you laughing at them, or are you laughing with them?
that's a great question. I mean, one of the joys of parenting is laughing at your children. So of course that's a joy I think all parents share. They're 11 and 9, no, 12. Oh my God, 12 as of last week, 9 and 6. Three daughters. I would say that they have inherited their parents' sense of humor. Like I've got this kind of deadpanny sarcasm that sneaks out that I think was probably most like wicked and active in my like early 20s and has now weirdly mutated kind of effortlessly into dad jokes. Like it's the slip into dad comedy is real. So they've got, I would say, I mean, parents are always proud and overestimating their children, but I would say they've probably got a bit more of a sophisticated understanding of humor than most because I'm always trying to crack them up and try and show them funny stuff. And my 12-year-old did tell me a few weeks ago that like I'm not that funny, like that it's just dad jokes. And so now like my new mission is to convince her that some people have thought of me as being a kind of funny person and that I'm going to somehow demonstrate to her that I've got a slightly more sophisticated sense of humor that she's kind of taking for granted. But she's just not buying it at all. But then that's part of the bit. Like she's doing a bit back to me, essentially, that I'm not funny. So
it's a joke with you. Yeah, you're in on the joke that you're not funny. It's absolutely 100%. I read a really interesting article the other day, and it's sort of hack evolutionary biology. So, which is one of my favorite things, where you're just like, oh, this is why people are like this, and there's no way to kind of prove it one way or another. But apparently, fatherly roughhousing and dad jokes as a kind of an extension of roughhousing. Fundamentally, a lot of dad jokes are destabilizing meaning. They're a kind of a teasing or a prodding or a like discomforting, and it's like that dad, stop it, like that makes children more resilient. So like that. Safe play with kind of these boundaries of whether it's humor or speech or that like that kind of frustration and annoyance that you get with your dad because he just keeps doing the I'm hungry, I'm dad, whatever it is. That's actually really good for your children's development and makes them more resilient against the small blows of life. So there you go.
That's exactly why I'm doing it, and those are the exact words I'd use to articulate the reasoning behind it. But there's something to it, though. I think, like I maybe just a reflection of who I am a little bit, and who and my partner, of course, who I believe is also doing some of the parenting. Like I don't mind the idea of my kids being destabilized a bit. Like, resilience. It's funny. I remember at one point when my oldest was younger, maybe like 5 or 6, had just started school, and we're in the middle of some conversation about something, and the word resilience came up. Like for me, like I was about to launch into like, okay, have you ever heard of this? I said, have you ever heard of this word resilience? And she went, yeah, Dad, of course. It's like a 5-year-old. I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, well, the core principles at my school are resilience, empathy. And she listed off a couple more. And I was just like, I didn't learn the meaning of the word resilience, let alone like try to factor it into my own personal being until I was in my 30s. And here's my 5-year-old going, yeah, Dad, I'm all over it. I'm resilient. And you're like, well, this is good. Like I felt, whether it's true or not, I felt like, okay, well, maybe the education system has shifted along a little bit from when I was there.
Yeah, well, I'm currently facing my daughter's 3.5, so starting to have to think about schools. And when I say starting to have to think about it, I know very well that there's people who've signed their children up from birth to various schools. But, I'm sort of torn about it because I travel, for like 2 or 3 months at a time. And at some point I'm going to have to stop if they're going to go to traditional schools. But if they don't go to traditional schools, I have to become an educator if I want to do the homeschooling thing. And that's got its own like whole thing. Thinking about all of these possibilities and schools and so on. And I was talking to my twin brother about it because the reason I'm in Queensland is because he's here with his children. And so I'm like, what schools? You've done all the research. Tell me, like, what have you learned? And he's like, I've learned that the worst teacher now is better educated about child psychological development, about different schools of pedagogy, about different ways that people learn than the best teacher was when we were young. And so if you just send her to a school and then whatever, figure out wherever their kind of blank spots and flaws are, you can you fill in those gaps yourself. But the sort of the fear that you'll send them to a bad school, you might get a bad class, you might get a bad sort of vibe,
bad situation,
but then again, you can move them.
Yep.
And it just took a big weight off my chest because I was like, what? Yeah, school is so formative. But actually, it's not that school is formative, it's that those years are formative. And they're
Yeah,
formative whether
it's
you go
true.
to a quote unquote good school or a bad school. And like a lot of good schools, like again, quote unquote, that get good results turn out really neurotic and upset people uh,
That's very true.
who get good
Yeah.
marks and get good or what used to be considered good jobs. But is any job a good job anymore? You know?
I think the other thing that I felt like took the pressure off a bit for me when I realized maybe once the kids did go to school, and then I don't know if it was just from my memory or whether it was like pulling up videos of them from when they were 2 or 3 years old. You go back and you do watch those cute videos that you filmed with your kids of them talking and telling stories and the conversations you used to have. And that realization that like they were there, like the personality, even some of their strengths and weaknesses, for want of a more appropriate term, are kind of there so early that it makes you realize that a lot of the work is, you say like primary school is this formative time, like it's 1, 2, 3 is that formative time. Like I don't want to freak you out, but it's like, I remember just that realization of like, oh crap, like probably the most important parenting I was doing for their whole lives was the bit where I A, didn't know what I was doing, and B, was like completely sleep deprived. And there's this weird thing where you go, well, okay, I guess it's done. I mean, obviously I'm going to keep working on helping my kids through whatever challenges they have and developing them and all that kind of stuff. But that was just a weird realization, I reckon, because it's depending on what your experience of those early couple of years is, it can be such a messy, foggy
See,
time.
I feel really good about that because I feel like that's my best or my most confident sort of period. Like the milk and
Yeah,
love and like
there you go.
that and the reading them books and that like that I feel very confident in. I think my terror is of the teenage years. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
maybe because I had such
yeah,
a bad time and also I was a well-behaved child having a bad time. So I don't really
yeah.
know. I
Okay.
like if my child like slams the door and is like, "I hate you." I'm like, I have no experience of that, and I'm not sure how I'm
Yeah.
going to cope. But my friend works in child health and safety in war zones for the
Mm,
UNHCR, and she said all of this stuff is like you're talking about these marginal differences at the very top end. All of the education things, all of those developmental stuff, a diet, as long as like between one and it was 0 and 3, if they have a safe place to sleep, if they have one primary caregiver who loves them and is present, um, and if they have enough food, that's like more than 90% of what makes a healthy adult. Like
yeah.
someone who's well balanced and well adjusted, and you can be in a war zone and still be pretty okay if you have that like love and safety. Um, you know that I like, and that again, all the rest is kind of luxury top level things like people who are taking, oh, do I take one spoonful of creatine or two spoonfuls of creatine? Like, first of all, are you going to the gym like at all? Secondly, are you getting enough sleep? All of these things are, if once you get the base layer in,
Basics. Yeah.
you look at these people like Brian Johnson, the billionaire who's, optimizing every element of his health to try and live forever. As far as billionaire-ness goes, fairly benevolent. Um, but the biggest thing you can do for your health, it adds like 11 years on average, is like having friends. Um, so not exactly measuring out your cacao nibs in a line on a scale. That might buy you 6 months, but like just having friends is
Yeah.
probably worth more investment of energy and time.
Yeah, and I watched that documentary like a month or so ago, and he just did not seem like he was having a lot of fun. And you don't want to be too judgy generally about choices people make. But I mean, there was a part of the nerd in me, I guess, was kind of like, oh, this is cool. Like he's essentially experimenting on himself to kind of like create data that we might not otherwise have. But then it didn't seem like you didn't have to dig very far for it all to sort of fall apart a bit. That's kind of what scientific research is for, not random billionaire guru dudes
Well, yeah,
who are essentially influencers. Like it was just, yeah, it was it was kind of a sad movie I found. And then, yeah, when I think they leave it maybe until halfway through the doco to show you pictures of what he looked like before he started his like longevity transformation, and he was just like
guy.
a dad guy. He was just a guy, and I was just like, oh, I want to meet that guy. Like he seems pretty chill and normal. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, look, I think it's a fascinating exercise. On one
Mm,
hand, like he's like that chap who got himself bitten by 200 snakes. Well, got himself bitten. He bit himself by 200 snakes. He made the snakes bite him 200 times, and now his
right.
blood might provide a source for like anti venom for everyone.
Okay.
Or it
That
might,
sounds cool.
yeah, which is super cool. So this kind of self experimentation, there is something cool about it, and the science part, and the part that like admires back in those early Enlightenment periods where they were like trying to turn lead into gold, and Newton was poking his eye to see what lenses did, and at the same time he was figuring out all these incredible principles of physics, but also then seeing if you could make people like just trying to do magic because they kind of didn't know the difference. And I feel like
Yeah.
there's something sort of appealing about that openness, but at the same time, it is marketing. He's selling products. He's selling
Yeah.
this idea. He's sort of starting a bit of a cult, and it's a fairly benevolent cult, probably. Um, but if you look at his history, he came from quite a tight and closed religion. So he's sort of moving into a tight and closed way of living. You can sort of see the psychology of it. But if he sets
Mm,
up something where it's not just him self recording, but it's thousands of citizen journalists doing the same
mm,
with like, solid, now everyone has one of these things on their wrists where you can actually get fairly good data about compliance and things, you know, maybe there is
mm.
something there that could be genuinely life changing rather than just sort of what it is at the moment, which is like maybe a bit inspiring if you want to be more healthy. You take what you want and you leave what you don't. And you also realize that he is, if we both go out in the sun the same amount of time, I'll burn before you do. So why would you think that anything would work for everyone? Um,
Mm. Yeah.
and yeah, I don't know. I think as far as billionaires go, he's one of the more benevolent and entertaining ones. So,
Don't know too many billionaires, but yes, I'll back you up on that. Yes.
well, so far at least. What have you been thinking about, wrestling with, turning over in your brain?
My goodness. Well, I've had an interesting 12 months, I suppose. Like I quit my job last June, at the end of last June. Which, and when I say my job, it's as much of a job as anything in the media or arts. It's like it was just a really privileged, wonderful thing I got to do and get paid for some reason, which was make radio for the ABC, for Triple J and Double J for 10 years. And yeah, like getting to that point of leaving took a while, and then going into that big unknown was awesome and frightening and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's been an interesting 12 months. And then the last 6 months ish, I've been working, actually focused really, really, like tunnel vision style on some work for an organization called Green Music Australia, which is a non-profit organization that essentially is trying to green the music industry, like make the music sector a more sustainable place by implementing new policy and new encouraging different behaviors. But my role in the last 6 months has been to work not on the like nuts and bolts of climate policy for music companies, which is a lot of what the organization does. My role has been working with the artists to kind of coordinate public campaigns or public like community action. So that's been really interesting, all in the context of the federal election. So I've been doing that kind of pretty intensely up until the election, the Australian federal election, which was 2 weeks ago-ish, 10 days ago. And then I've just actually been on a break for the last 10 days. So you've caught me in a bit of a like, yeah, like my head is kind of swimming a little bit, like I'm partly on holiday, but I'm also reassessing what comes next, what's important to me. trying to think about what was the last 6 months? Did it make a difference? Trying to activate the music sector to talk about climate. Did it work? What were we even trying to do? And then think about what comes next and what do I want? What's good for the planet? So, all of these just mild things kicking around in my brain. Also just trying not to like let those big ideas overwhelm me, which, yeah, this week has been about just making some music and forgetting about all that stuff.
So I mean, there's so much in there. First of all, you
Yeah,
quit.
sorry.
No. I this is don't apologize. This is like where the meat is, right? You said these last
Yep.
12 months have been interesting. You quit a job that you've been doing for 10 years. Was there like a really strong reason, or just a feeling, or what made you think end of the road, next thing?
It was a culmination of a bunch of stuff, really. I think like I love radio. Like I love making radio. I just it's really fun, and also love music. And actually, the majority of the radio I've done over the years has been music shows, which has been well every all of the radio I've done has been music shows, but some of it has been more curated around my taste and sort of I don't know that tastemaker style of radio. Like, hey, here's 2 hours of songs I've picked.
Oh, nice.
Maybe it's maybe you're going to discover a new thing that you love, or maybe it's going to expand the way you think about music or your life or whatever it might be. But I have at times also done radio shows where you get handed the playlist and it's you're just sort of there to keep people company and help them get through a few hours essentially. So at the ABC, that was the majority of what I was doing the last 5 or 6 years at Double J. I was doing their afternoon show. I've interviewed you, Alice, many years ago. Yes, back
Was
in 2018.
was I a good interviewee back in the day?
You were fantastic. I went back to listen to it, but it's been erased from the ABC website. So I don't know if they went through and they just erased all the
Specifically,
Tim Shiel stuff. I doubt it.
censorship.
Uh, yeah, man, you're dead to us now, Tim. But essentially, so that was all of that is the preamble to say I love radio and I love music. But I got a bit bored of doing that particular job. And radio is weird in that you, on the one hand, you feel kind of social, like because your job is to do what I'm doing now, which is talking to a microphone, but you can't see the person on the other end. There is sort of no one on the other end except for the person you have in your mind, like your imaginary friend that you're just talking to every day for a few hours. So, and I think some people are built to do that and enjoy it, and I definitely am one of them, but I'm not sure it's healthy for me anyway to do that for the rest of my life. So yeah, I just got a bit bored and a bit, just the ABC of it all probably got to me a bit. Um, People do get institutionalized in that place, the public broadcaster, and I definitely started to feel like I had internalized a lot of the things about the ABC that I had sort of always been wary of even before joining. And when I started to feel that, it still took me a year or two to leave, partly because I just loved doing it and I loved hanging out with the audience every day. Audience, which is the imaginary person in my head, as I just discussed. But and also, frankly, it's like it was stability. Like it's a stable job. It was just kind of like that feeling of, oh my God, like how many people in Australia would be so grateful? Creative people would be so grateful to have this stable, this stable, fun job that essentially helped my family like exist for 10 years. It helped my partner go in and out of maternity leave and come back from maternity leave 3 times in her job. But yeah, by the end of it, I was pretty burnt out and pretty kind of hollowed out as well.
It's a hard job as well, because you are talking to this sort of imaginary interlocutor. I did community radio in Sydney for a while, and the producers always used to call me in and say, "Can you please not announce the names of these bands sarcastically?" Um,
Okay. Like, can
because
you give me an example?
Well, because it was FBI radio in Sydney, so the brief
Yeah.
was new music, particularly Sydney music. It was
Oh,
more than
yeah.
50% of it, and so there would be some good bands and some not so good bands, and some sort of adventurously named bands. And apparently I would occasionally let my skepticism slip through in my voice of like, well, that was an interesting track. Where you're actually meant to be sort of wholehearted in your enthusiasm for the music that you're showcasing. And,
Yeah.
you know, it was great. There was some incredible music. And I stopped being able to do it because after my mum died, I couldn't listen to any music at all for a year without
Oh,
immediately sobbing. Like even just
oh my
music in
God.
an elevator, it wasn't like slight tear in my eyes. It would just be like, like immediate, like gut. Because my mum was a musician, and so all of my experiences, formative experiences of music, were through her. So
Oh
yeah, I'd
wow.
literally hear some tune, and I'd be like, ah! So I
Oh my God. Okay.
couldn't do it anymore.
That must have been, I mean, obviously that's, I'm sorry for your loss and that's terrible. But in a way, like, I mean, I'm glad you came back to music, it sounds like. And I wonder what that experience would be like. You know, it's kind of like that's a music detox.
Yeah,
And then when you come back, I don't know, did the music feel so vibrant and alive and, you know,
yeah.
like what did it feel like?
I came back to it through very light-hearted songs on repeat.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like I just listened to Dolly Parton's 9 to 5 all day. You know,
Yeah.
that'd be the thing, and sort of eased my way back into it. And you know, then classical music was a
Just low
bandit for
stakes.
just going
Yeah.
straight into the emotions, so that I kind of worked my way
Yep.
back up to like, oh, a violin piece doesn't make me immediately disintegrate.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Wow. All right.
but
Well,
yeah,
I mean, yeah, very curious about that. I mean, yeah, that would be a really interesting thing to do, I think.
well, one of the
It's a bit like
things
you don't eat sugar for a month and then you come back and you pop a piece of chocolate in your mouth and you're
is,
like, oh my God, it's an
yeah,
explosion.
it's almost too much. I think one of the
Yeah.
things that helped ease back into it was to um, read up on and learn a bit more about the kind of music um, theory, which obviously, I mean, I learned it when I was younger, when I was playing instruments more, but just to kind of go in and be like, oh, this chord structure and this instrument and this harmony and this is what's going on and which funnily enough was kind of my mum's academic area of interest, like, but
Mm,
being able to be slightly clinical about the music rather than let it just
yep.
go straight down your throat and pull your guts out your mouth,
Yes.
helped me kind of ease my way back into it, thinking about what the music was doing rather than just feeling what the music was doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah. Do you still play an instrument at all?
I still play the banjo, but only for comedy purposes. I'm very
Oh,
much self-taught, three chords, just backing for, you know, a stupid song on the banjo. But I
okay.
used to play
Just for clarity, do
other
you mean
things.
that you incorporate the banjo into your performance, or do you mean that it is just funny that you are a person who plays the banjo, and so you've maintained your commitment to the instrument because it's a funny thing about yourself
Well, no, I would play it. It's a
in the show?
handy in the show. Although again, I
Yeah,
stopped doing that when I started carrying my children around because it turns out that, you know, a banjo is 16 kilograms and there's only so many bags you can carry, and I'd prefer to carry my children around with me. Um,
human banjos.
I had one sort of interstitial year where I was carrying the children, and then every city I went to, I'd tweet, "Does anyone have a banjo?" And so I met a lot of nice people that way.
Yeah,
But that again is a bit of a hassle. Um, so now I tend not to do the music in the shows anymore, but I'll come back
yeah,
to it when my children can carry themselves. Um,
yeah. Or when they can play the banjo.
yeah, but maybe I'll bring them on stage
That's it.
to play the banjo as a reprise of my very first comedy experiences, which were having my brother play the banjo while I did the songs. He hated
Amazing.
comedy so much.
Yeah. So you'd be halfway through a joke and he'd just start playing loudly behind you,
Uh,
trying to
it actually ended up being sort of
sabotage.
the backbone of our shtick was that he was there under
Yeah, yeah,
duress.
right.
And that if we got
Okay.
through the comedy set, at the end, I would let him play a serious song. And
Yeah.
at the end of our set, we would play You Are My Fire by the Backstreet Boys, and he'd do all of the sound effects with his mouth. And so, like, but if I started laughing, you'd say, keep it serious. And there's nothing funnier than someone trying not to laugh. So it was a good
Yep,
closer. It was a very long
that's
time
good.
ago. Uh,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so you quit your job. You spent 6 months looking around for what you wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, just sort of purposefully not doing anything. I had a few kind of older and wiser friends say, if your work life family situation allows it, like don't rush into anything. I also have the benefit of, even though I have this completely bonkers CV, like it just doesn't, it's just white, like the things that are on my CV, I have no right to have been there for many of them. But despite that, I'm not really qualified to do anything. Like the things that I'm qualified to do, there aren't jobs for. Like the no people don't get paid to do it. I've just got very lucky to get paid a couple of times to do these things. So yeah, so even I wasn't looking for jobs, but they I'm surely weren't out there anyway. Um, but yeah, but then eventually I went on this retreat. I applied to go on this environmental retreat run by the organization I ended up working at, where they invited 20 musicians from around the country who were either already active in like climate advocacy, or had a deep alignment or passion for it. They kind of got them all together, took us down to Tassie for a few days for a bit of an intensive um, cult indoctrination situation. Uh, and yeah, I was pretty hooked after that. So when the job came up, I applied for it. And that's what I've been doing the last 6 months. But I think just getting towards the end of the campaign and just feeling like, oh, this is pretty intense. Like I've kind of slipped back into the very intense workload that was part of the reason why I burned out in the first place. So I know myself well enough to know that that's a thing I'm going to have to deal with my whole life. Is this kind of like ebb and flow of throwing myself 110% into things and then needing to come up for air, and finding a way to do that while still contributing to the family bank balance and not burning the rest of my family out. And that's kind of the ongoing challenge. But luckily I've been through that cycle so many times now that I can kind of course correct a bit better than in the past.
Yeah, for my setup, I think I'm similar to you, is that like working in seasons works for me. So I really didn't
Yeah.
enjoy working in a law firm where it's high stress but at a constant pitch with occasional sort
Yep.
of peaks on top of that. But everything you do is important, uh, in that
Yeah.
if you mess it up, you could lose your client, thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. Uh, I spent my whole kind of career of creative work feeling guilty about the bits where I was going for a walk or
Right.
drifting or sort of relaxing. And then when, the process of having, giving birth or bearing children, uh, part of what you have to do when you're pregnant is be like, what do I need? Is it a little snack? Is it to have a bit of a sit? And that's like vitally important work. And also because I was pregnant in COVID, I realized that a lot of the things that I'd been doing, like bouncing between cafes to get work done or writing on the bus, were all ways to build those breaks into my routine where when I was stuck in one place, I was like, oh, I'm just not productive if I sit down for 4 hours and stare at the screen. I do need to go for a little walk and have a cup of tea in a park and then come back. And so that kind of, yeah, I wasted so much time feeling guilty about stuff that I thought was avoiding work, but was in fact integral to the work.
Yeah. Yeah. I I yes, I agree. But one thing I've found with myself is that I I I can kind of just get into a zone where I'm just working just really hard.
Mm,
I often don't need to take that break,
mm,
but I probably should. Like some part of me probably does. I think over the years I've been good at just compartmentalizing away that bit. I'm also I'm a big fan of flow state. Like my creativity is generally completely tied to flow state, which is that sense of you are just in the zone of doing it, and then suddenly you've lost track of time, you're in a slightly altered state of consciousness. Like that's like, and I've been making music on and off for 20 years ish, and that is like, that is literally how I make music. Is just my whole creative process has essentially been about reducing the amount of time it takes for me to get into that zone. Once I'm in that zone, nothing can kind of break me from it. I don't need to eat or drink or anything like that. And radio is kind of similar. It was like 3 hours of doing that every day. It was just like when the show would start, off, and then I'm just in it, and then the show would end, and that's when I would go, holy
Yeah.
fuck.
Oh,
Like,
I've
I'm
got a
so
headache.
tired. Yeah, I just had the best 3 hours of my day,
Yeah.
And honestly, that was another factor in me needing to give it up, really. It was just that feeling of realizing like just how much I was exhausting of myself in the show.
Mm.
And then I would go home, my show would finish at 6 p.m. So I would get on my bike or get on the train or whatever and get home to my family, and my kids have had dinner and they're getting tired. It's that little window just before they go to bed. And like, I've got very little to give them at that point. Like that was, once I, really recognized that pattern, I was like, I'm going to miss I mean, it's not like I've been a very absent dad or anything like that. Like I've had a very flexible life. I've been very available, but it was just that thing of like, I'm missing this just very specific part of the day, and that didn't, it didn't feel good anymore. But yeah, going back to what you were saying, yeah, it's funny. I think I could probably do with going for more walks every now and then.
I feel like flow state is a good example of another way of thinking about effort as well, though, because
Yeah,
flow state isn't pushing your head up against the brick wall. It's
yeah,
it's walking that tightrope, and you can't walk the tightrope when you're trying really hard. You have to be in that, like, again, you have to
yeah,
relax the part of it that is effort in order to put
yep,
in the work, which is,
yes,
I think we can think of those, of effort and work, as the same thing,
yes,
which I don't think they necessarily are.
yeah, yeah. When you say that, it makes me think about pressure, which is a I think pressure is the enemy for most creative people, or at least in a lot of the conversations I've had with musicians and stuff over the years. It's usually the ones that have put a lot of pressure on themselves, or are feeling a lot of pressure from other people, or have just internalized like the default pressures of how music functions in 2025, or how the creative sector works. That is often the thing that seems to burn people out, and it's often the thing that when I go through phases of burnout or moments where I'm not feeling my best about all of it, when I take a step back, I go, okay, I've actually put a lot of pressure on myself, and that's what's happened. I've fallen over because I've taken on all of this pressure. So it's funny, I kind of think of these things as adjacent, if not the same. Effort, pressure. The thing is though, the thing about the creative process is that there are many years for most of us where there is a lot of effort because your output or the stuff you're working on, the things you're making, just don't meet your own expectations or your own standards. So it's that Ira Glass thing. Have you ever seen the Ira
Yeah,
Glass?
it's one of my favorite quotes.
Yeah, which is talking about storytelling, but it's this idea that often when you get into a creative field, whether you want to do it professionally or not, but particularly if you want to do it professionally, again, whatever that means, you often come to it with all this taste. You come to it as a person with refined taste. And so you kind of know what is quote unquote good or not, or more accurately, you know what you like, right? And what you think is good or not. And yeah, for me, definitely there were years when I started making music where I just could not get the music to meet that standard. Um, so I guess a lot of effort did go in. You can't like, I don't know if there's a magic way of being a creative person where right from the start, there's no effort and no pressure.
Well, yeah, no, I don't think there
I think it's
should.
a thing you work through, maybe.
Yeah, I don't think there should ever be no effort, because I think part of what generates creativity is the rhythm, like is the
Yeah,
push and then relax, and the sort of liminal spaces that you create is where the kind of fertility emerges. So you think about something really hard, and you like examine it and you research it and you like learn the skills, and then you take a step back And then like in the taking of the step back in that space is where the new, like the you comes in, where your kind of creative input emerges. And I think
Yep.
for me, so much of creative production is, yeah, what's the rhythm of push and pull? You know,
Mm.
what's an input phase and what's an output phase, and like how can I create those states of flow on demand, which is, you know, if you've got a podcast every week or you've got to get a piece of writing done, or like particularly satirical comedy where it's like these 6 news stories, whether they inspire you or not, you got to have 10 jokes for each. Um, and so figuring out how to get yourself into that place. For me, it's always about rhythm.
Mm.
What the push pull, what the pace is, what the and if I can't think of it, then it's always again about like 2 poles and moving between them. Um, whether it's like intimacy versus, you know, perspective. So how, do I look at it like that? Do I do the zoom in and zoom out and then I can see more about it, or do I translate it from one form into another and then you can see more about it? And it's always like some, at least in my head, it's always some metronome between two
Yeah.
states and figuring out what the axes are along which I can play, and
Yep.
that's this. Yeah, it's like
Yeah. So
what's his
wibbly wibbly
name?
wobbly.
Yeah, there's the beat and the pace of it is what gives you the generation, like Pistons or something. There was that chap who uh, used to, like Plato or Aristotle or one of those guys who gets attributed every good idea, who used to think that the time where you were just about to fall asleep was the most fertile time for ideas, and so he would sit in his easy chair with metal balls in his hand over a metal plate, and as he fell asleep, they'd fall out of his hand and wake him up. Um, so he was trying to like maximize that state. So he'd like think really
Yeah.
hard about the idea, and then he'd go towards having a nap and try and catch those sleepy generative thoughts and write them
Yeah.
down.
Wow. That's good. There's probably an app for that now.
Recognizes your brain as it's falling asleep. Um,
Yeah.
I should wrap up. This is such a fascinating conversation. Where can people support your work or find more of you?
Ooh, that's interesting. I don't know. Just Google Tim Shiel. Like you may find yourself similar. I'm not sure, but I've got like this. I'm like 10 different things. So it's kind of like, if you really love video games, then you can go and find like the soundtracks I have worked on for video games. But then like if you're a climate warrior, then you can you can come and be part of the community that I'm part of with the organization I'm working for now. Like, it's so weird. I never know how to answer that question. I mean, I've got a podcast and a Substack and an Instagram and a Spotify and I have all the things. So when people go, how do I find you? I'm just like, I don't know. Like, where do you hang out? Like, I'm
What's your
probably
thing?
there.
Find
Is your thing a podcast? Oh, I'm probably there. Or is your thing, yeah. So,
Look over your shoulder. Tim Shiel is standing directly behind you, wherever you are.
oh my God.
Um,
Yes.
I that I am running writers' retreats in Switzerland in September. If anyone wants
Whoa.
to come along to those, there are still, I think, 4 slots available. So if you head over to patreon.com/Alice Fraser and sign up, you can get access there to the application form. And also, if you sign up, even at a free level, you get all of my blog posts and things. And if you sign up at a pay level, you get 4 writers' meetings a week. If you want to come on Zoom and do a writers' meeting, we have comedy writers meeting, we have 2 general writers meetings, and we have 1 admin and industry writers meeting where we all get together and do our grant applications, or at least in theory, that's what we do. But we usually just end up complaining. But that's over at the Patreon, which is also now sort of my main one-stop shop, because all of the social media is kind of unpredictable about who it will reach anymore.
Uh, I should talk to you about this. That's the one thing I don't have is a Patreon.
It's been, yeah, like it's been incredible for me. You know, I say that, like, I mean, it got me through COVID.
Yeah.
you know, and then also, you know, allowed me to take some level of maternity leave as an
Yes.
artist, um, because I could just do a writer's meeting while breastfeeding, you know, just have the camera be collarbones up and actually still be able to do my work. You learn really quickly how little you want to do that shitty gig in Hay once podcast and the Patreon cover your bills. Like, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
actually, no, no, thank you. I don't want to do that horrible uh, thing with the creepy guy that I have to share a car with for 4 hours.
Yep. Hopefully we chat again sometime. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for the chat. I really loved it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it. I think if you are willing, I'd definitely have you back. And if you like science fiction and fantasy, maybe we can get you on Realms Unknown.
Are you kidding? Like, yes.
All right.